Dan Campbell dropping hints on the Detroit Lions trade deadline plan. So there's been a lot of rumors, but to actually have Dan Campbell, who is very transparent by nature, which is so nice, come out and give some actual quotes today about the deadline and what they're doing and what Brad Holmes is doing is really good. So let's get right into it. This comes from Pride of Detroit. They asked him what him and general manager Brad Holmes if they've had conversations and what's going to happen. So he says, yeah, there will be some things that could come up, and he's talking about over the weekend. Now, Brad's been grinding. I mean, he hasn't stopped on that. That'll go all the way up to game time and beyond. So remember, the trade deadline is Halloween on Tuesday, but the Lions have a Monday night game. So 30 other teams will all have Monday to converse and negotiate with other teams. The Lions and Raiders will be full preparation for their Monday night game. But as Dan Campbell points out, it makes total sense. It's like it won't affect Dan Campbell, and Brad Holmes can do his thing. So while they're getting ready, they're at home, they're getting ready to do it. He can have conversations and make something happen if need be. So Brad Holmes is going to keep on rolling. So here's what's interesting about it, and we'll get back to who we're looking at here in just a second. They asked Dan Campbell, do the Lions have anything in the works? Campbell was asked if Holmes had given him any intriguing updates, and after a few seconds of thought, he said, maybe, with a smirk. So it's kind of a little bit more here in depth on Twitter, where they asked him if Brad Holmes has brought any trade scenarios to him that have been intriguing, and he said, maybe, ask Brad. And he gave a little smirk. So 100% Brad Holmes has brought him stuff, like duh. And there's some interesting things that could be going out there. Brad Holmes' history of, just look back at his history and kind of predict what he might do in the future, has a history of doing things that we totally do not expect. And that's drafting, trades that he has made, drafting especially, where we have our eyes set on something and he just goes totally the other way. So again, here are some things that have been put out there. Josh Uche from the Patriots, an edge piece that gives us some depth, gives us a pure pass rush guy. If you've been watching our videos, we'll go back to a couple more. Danielle Hunter is on there as well. If you've been watching our videos, you'll know, and I got some more updates, don't worry, from Dan Campbell, some things that we might do. We've been talking about how Aiden Hutchinson is our only pass rusher because Charles Harris was going to be that other guy coming back from injury. It looked so good. He was a healthy scratch last week for the Aquara brothers. So at one time, it looked like we had a ton of pass rushers, but the Aquara brothers just have not done anything in the past 4 years. They've been injured constantly. Can't get on the field, then they do, then they're injured. It's just like, what in the world? So the Aquara brothers are just not doing anything. Charles Harris is a healthy scratch. Then the other guys are like Pascal and Kaminsky. Those guys are, they're not true pass rushers. So it's like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden you look at Aiden Hutchinson, you're like, if he ever gets hurt, we are in big time trouble with our pass rush. So I would believe the priority goes pass rusher and then corner. We saw last week when Jerry Jacobs was out, any one of our two corners, him or Sutton, we're going to really struggle. So corner is going to be there as well. So you've got to believe defensive end and corner are 1, 2, or both. Or is there an option that we do both? So look at some other guys that have been mentioned out there for us. Danielle Hunter, and then Patriots defensive back Jalen Mills. Danielle Hunter leads the league right now in sacks, and he's on the last year of his contract. He's an older guy. But the Vikings they're in the mix. And that is what Pride of Detroit pointed out the other day is most teams have at least 3 victories. So that puts you at 3-4, and you're a 1 game out of your division lead, and you win the division, you get a home playoff game. So a lot of teams are probably not willing to just punt on the season and give up a player. But we've seen more action at the trade deadline than in years past over these last couple of years. Dan Campbell also was open about the fact that previously he dropped hints on, hey, we want someone that fits in the culture. We don't want to overpay for anybody. So the fact that he's talked so much about the trade deadline, again, Dan Campbell, appreciate his willingness to tell us things. It tells me they're going to absolutely make a move. I mean, I would be shocked if the Lions don't make a move. I think Dan Campbell has talked too much about who they're looking for, types of guys. He's talking about Brad Holmes grinding, like just going after it. He could have easily said, not really looking, but if the right thing pops up, we'll definitely take a look at it. The fact that Brad Holmes is actively making calls and looking to do something tells me that there's going to be a trade that goes down. And remember, it's going to be something that we don't expect. So here's one for you. Is there a possibility that the Lions trade Hendon Hooker? At the trade deadline piece this past week, The Athletic, former general manager Randy Mueller suggested Goff's outstanding season could lead the Lions to consider trading Hooker if they get a good offer. And so he said if he was still a general manager, he'd give up a second-round pick for him. So last year, my draft prep, I saw a QB who, after full evaluation, I felt was a possible NFL starter. So I don't think we take anybody off the table is why I bring this up. You've got Hendon Hooker, who's got because we wondered, what is Jared Goff going into this year? He finished last year strong. What is he? He's really good. And we're lucky to have him. And he's only like 28 years old. It's like, come on, he's got another 8 years if we want him. And so Hendon Hooker, it's like, yeah, it'd be nice to have a good backup, but do you really want to keep somebody if somebody comes out and says, we'll give you a first or a second? Or you can package Hendon Hooker with an Aquara brother and get like Hendon Hooker and I'm just talking out loud now. I'm talking crazy, but a Hendon Hooker, an Aquara brother, and a third-round pick for a good defensive end out there, a starting defensive end. Like, there are a lot that we could possibly do and package together. And it goes back to, you worry about, I mean, we've got enough trust in Brad Holmes that we worry about next year, and the year after that. I get being patient, building this the right way, holding on to our picks. I get it. But we've learned that Brad Holmes is a good enough drafter that we can give up a couple picks. He's still going to make the right picks with the picks that we have. And we have a window here. We're 5-2. I think if we win Monday night and go into that trade deadline the next day, you're 6-2 going into a bye to win the division. The window's wide open. And you could look at, man, if we are one Aiden Hutchinson injury away from being in big trouble. So let's get a defensive end or a corner. We are one injury from corner or defensive end away from just being like, nah, man. And I get it. We see the Ravens game, and it's kind of skewing everything because it's like, that kind of like just messed me up. We're a good team, but if we want to make a real, hey, let's go win the division and get a home playoff game, I think we need to make a move. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see all of you on the next one.